Private John Martin, also called Giovanni Martino, was an Italian-American soldier who worked as a trumpeter for the United States Army's 7th Cavalry Regiment. He is famous for being one of the few men who lived through the Battle of Little Bighorn, which is also called Custer's Last Stand, on June 25, 1876. Martin was born in Italy during 1852 and came to the United States, where he joined the Army in 1873. He was placed in the 7th Cavalry Regiment and worked as a trumpeter, taking part in several campaigns, including the Battle of Little Bighorn. In the battle, Martin was dispatched by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer to carry a message to Captain Frederick Benteen, which meant he was among the final men to see Custer alive. Martin lived through the battle and later gave a thorough description of his experiences, which has turned into a significant historical record. A little before 8 o'clock on the morning of June 25th, my captain, Benteen, called me to him and told me to report to General Custer as his orderly trumpeter. The regiment was then several miles from the divide between the Rosebud and the Little Bighorn. We had stopped there to make coffee after marching through the night. We knew, naturally, that many Indians were somewhere close by because we had been passing through empty villages for 2 days and following a heavy trail from the Rosebud. And on the 24th, we had discovered carcasses of dead buffalo that had been killed and skinned only a short time before. I reported to the general himself, and he just looked at me and nodded. He was speaking to an Indian scout named Bloody Knife when I reported, and Bloody Knife was telling him about a large village in the valley, several hundred teepees, and about 5,000 Sioux. I sat down a short distance away and listened to the conversation. I could not understand what the Indian said, but from what the general said in asking questions and his discussion with the interpreter, I understood what it was about. The general was dressed that morning in a blue-gray flannel shirt, buckskin trousers, and long boots. He was wearing a standard company hat. His yellow hair was cut short, not extremely short, but it was not long and curly on his shoulders like it had been before. Very soon the general jumped on his horse and rode bareback around the camp, speaking to the officers in low tones and telling them what he wanted them to do. By 8:30, the command was ready to march, and the scouts went on ahead. We followed slowly, about 15 minutes later. I rode about 2 yards behind the general. We moved on at a walk until about 2 hours later we reached a deep ravine where we halted. The general left us there and went away with the scouts. I did not go with him, but stayed with the adjutant. This was when he went up to the crow's nest on the divide to look for the Sioux village that Bloody Knife had told him about. He was gone a long time, and when he came back, they informed him about finding fresh pony tracks close by and that the Sioux had spotted us in the ravine. Immediately, he ordered me to sound officer's call, and I did so. This showed that he understood now that we could not surprise the Sioux, and so there was no use to remain quiet any longer. For 2 days before this, there had been no trumpet calls, and every precaution had been taken to hide our march. But now everything was different. The officers came quickly, and they had a serious conference with the general. None of the men were allowed to come near them, but soon they separated and went back to their companies. Then we moved on again, and after a while, about noon, crossed the divide. Pretty soon the general said something to the adjutant that I could not hear and pointed off to the left. In a few minutes, Captain Benteen, with 3 troops, left the column and rode off in the direction that the general had pointed. I wondered where they were going because my troop was one of them. The rest of the regiment rode on in 2 columns. Colonel Reno with 3 troops on the left and the other 5 troops under General Custer on the right. I was riding right behind the general. We followed the course of a little stream that led in the direction of Little Bighorn River. Reno was on the left bank and we on the right. All the time as we rode, scouts were riding in and out, and the general would listen to them and sometimes gallop away a short distance to look around. Sometimes Reno's column was several hundred yards away, and sometimes it was close to us, and then the general had motioned with his hat and they crossed over to where we were. Soon we came to an old teepee that contained a dead warrior inside. It was burning. The Indian scouts had set it on fire. Just a little off from that, there was a little hill, from which Fred Gerard, one of the scouts, saw some Indians between us and the river. He called to the general and pointed them out. He said they were running away. The general ordered the Indian scouts to follow them, but they refused to go. Then the general motioned to Colonel Reno, and when he rode up, the general told the adjutant to order him to go down and cross the river and attack the Indian village, and that he would support him with the whole regiment. He said he would go down to the other end and drive them, and that he would have Benteen hurry up and attack them in the cinder. Reno, with his 3 troops, left at once on a trot, going toward the river, and we followed for a few hundred yards and then swung to the right, down the river. We went at a gallop, too, just stopped once to water the horses. The general seemed to be in a hurry. After we had gone about a mile or 2, we came to a big hill that overlooked the valley, and we rode around the base of it and halted. Then the general took me with him, and we rode to the top of the hill, where we could see the village and the valley on the other side of the river. It was a big village, but we couldn't see it all from there, though we didn't know it then. But several hundred teepees were in plain sight. There were no bucks to be seen. All we could see was some squaws and children playing, and a few dogs and ponies. The general seemed both surprised and glad, and said the Indians must be in their tents, asleep. We did not see anything of Reno's column when we were up on the hill. I am sure the general did not see them at all, because he looked all around with his glasses, and all he said was that we had got them this time. He turned in the saddle and took off his hat and waved it so the men of the command, who were halted at the base of the hill, could see him, and he shouted to them, "Hurrah, boys! We've got them. We'll finish them up and then go home to our station." Then the general and I rode back down to where the troops were, and he talked a minute with the adjutant, telling him what he had seen. We rode on, pretty fast, until we came to a big ravine that led in the direction of the river, and the general pointed down there and then called me. This was about a mile down the river from where we went up on the hill, and we had been going at a trot and gallop all the way. It must have been about 3 miles from where we left Reno's trail. The general said to me, "Orderly, I want you to take a message to Colonel Benteen. Ride as fast as you can and tell him to hurry. Tell him it's a big village, and I want him to be quick and to bring the ammunition packs." He didn't stop at all when he was telling me this, and I just said, "Yes, sir," and checked my horse when the adjutant said, "Wait, orderly, I'll give you a message," and he stopped and wrote it in a big hurry, in a little book, and then tore out the leaf and gave it to me, and then he told me, "Now, orderly, ride as fast as you can to Colonel Benteen. Take the same trail we came down. If you have time and there is no danger, come back, but otherwise, stay with your company." My horse was pretty tired, but I started back as fast as I could go. The last I saw of the command, they were going down into the ravine. The gray horse troop was in the center, and they were galloping. The adjutant had told me to follow our trail back, and so in a few minutes I was back on the same hill again where the general and I had looked at the village. But before I got there, I heard firing behind me, and I looked around and saw Indians, some waving buffalo robes and some shooting. They had been in ambush. Just as I was approaching the summit of the elevation, I chanced upon Boston Custer. He was riding at a run, but when he saw me, he checked his horse and shouted, "Where's the general?" And I answered, pointing behind me, "Right behind that next ridge you'll find him," and he dashed on. That was the last time he was ever seen alive. When I got up on the hill, I looked down, and there I saw Reno's battalion in action. It had not been more than 10 or 15 minutes since the general and I were on the hill, and then we had seen no Indians, but now there were lots of them, riding around and shooting at Reno's men, who were dismounted and in skirmish line. I don't know how many Indians there were, a lot of them. I did not have time to stop and watch the fight. I had to get on to Colonel Benteen, but the last I saw of Reno's men, they were fighting in the valley, and the line was falling back. Some Indians saw me because right away they began shooting at me. Several shots were fired at Mefferer 5. I think, but I was lucky and did not get hit. My horse was struck in the hip, though I did not know it until later. It was a very warm day and my horse was hot, and I kept on as fast as I could go. I didn't know where Colonel Benteen was, nor where to look for him, but I knew I had to find him. I followed our trail back to the place we had watered our horses and looked all around for Colonel Benteen. Pretty soon I saw his command coming. I was riding at a jog trot then. My horse was all in, and I was looking everywhere for Colonel Benteen. As soon as I saw them coming, I waved my hat to them and spurred my horse, but he couldn't go any faster. It was just a short distance before I encountered Colonel Benteen. He was riding quite a distance in front of his troops, with his orderly trumpeter at a fast trot. The nearest officer to him was Captain Weir, who was at the head of his troop about 200 or 300 yards back. I saluted and handed the message to Colonel Benteen, and then I told him what the general said, that it was a big village and to hurry. He said, "Where's the general now?" And I answered that the Indians we saw were running, and I supposed that by this time he had charged through the village. I was going to tell him about Major Reno being in action too, but he didn't give me the chance. He said, "What's the matter with your horse?" And I said, "He's just tired out, I guess." The colonel said, "Tired out? Look at his hip." And then I saw the blood from the wound. Colonel Benteen said, "You're lucky it was the horse and not you." By this time Captain Weir had come up to us, and Colonel Benteen handed the message to him to read and told me to join my company. They gave me another horse, and I joined my troop and rode on with them. The pack train was not very far behind them. It was in sight, maybe a mile away, and the mules were coming along, some of them walking, some trotting, and others running. We moved on faster than the packs could go, and soon they were out of sight, except that we could see their dust.